And here we are, game number 2. Adelscott taking the lead 1-0 to MVP. We're on Mill.Adelscott, which I just want to point out has been modified to eliminate close spawn positions. So there's still the option of far by air and land, so cross positions, or close by air. The positions we have here with Adelscott from Team Millennium, my new man crush move over Thorzane, spawning in the top as the blue Protoss, and his opponent, faltering in game number 1, is going to be the red Terran IM.Mvp.
I cannot believe game number 1 went so one-sidedly to Adelscott. I mean, I know Adelscott's playstyle and his mechanics are good enough to take games off of top Korean players, but for him to do it with such ease and such class, it almost feels like he didn't even break a sweat in that game. So I think if he brings a similar playstyle to this map, it could really pay off. Just because Adelscott, he got a really quick third last game, and it's pretty easy to get a third on this map as well, and drops not as effective on this map as we can see in different other maps. It's much more effective on other maps. So Adelscott's got to be feeling amazing this game, not only because his playstyle is pretty good for this map, but because he completely stomped a former GSL champion. I can't imagine anything that feels better than doing that in StarCraft 2.
And for people who have never played StarCraft at a high level or even under pressure, the mental aspect of it is actually insanely huge. If you play someone and you feel helpless, you feel like you played perfectly and they still beat you, going into game 2 is such a low feeling, and that's completely reversed now in game number 2, as I should stop talking about that because Adelscott going for a 15 Nexus? What?
Wow, it does look like he's going to be grabbing that at the 15 mark. If there was any all-in rush from MVP, this game would mostly be over. However, IM.Mvp is going for a standard opener here. And again, Adelscott showing us that he loves these early expansions, getting it before Gateway, especially on a map like Mill.Adelscott. I would not expect this. Maybe on a map like Tal'Darim Altar, which we could see in Game 3 if it gets there. But this, I mean, even IM.Mvp is going to scout this right away, may send out his very first units here. If you click on his barracks, it is rallied all the way to his base. So if he micros well here, could cause some damage. Adelscott will most likely have to pull off workers if MVP commits to this.
Now keep in mind, TSL Mill.Adelscott has been modified so the bottom of the ramp cannot be easily blocked by buildings, so that would be an option available to MVP. Just block that off with bunkers and rally a Marine in to finish the job. Not an option here on this version, and I'm interested to see how can Adelscott make this safe. Looks like he's got his gas going, he's got his second gateway on the way, scouting with a probe, he's going to run into this Marine. This is clearly a build he's worked through in various permutations and seen, if this happens, I can make it safe like this, and I'm really interested to learn along with the viewers right now.
The Marine is going to have to be shooting this Nexus for a very long time. We do see probes transferring over right now. May have to pull them off the line and actually engage the Marine itself. Now, what I like MVP doing here is that he's actually following this up with the Reaper, followed by the concussive shot upgrade. That Marine actually getting surrounded instantly. That's actually really bad for MVP because he wanted to delay that expansion mining as long as possible. But there is going to be a Reaper here, keeping in mind that the Cybernetics core is just now finishing, so this Reaper will go unchecked for a little bit inside the main base.
Yeah. Reapers with good micro dealing so much damage, and I guess Adelscott really needs to get his Chrono Boost working on this Stalker. He's not Chrono Boosting. Here comes the Reaper. Gonna move in and start sniping probes. He's got 1 kill already. Moving forward. Adelscott now reacting, pulling all his probes, trying to chase out the Reaper. The Stalker had only 50%. He's pulling the Zealot out, but that's not going to be able to do too much against a Reaper except buy time. Reaper only with 2 kills so far. Adelscott pulling probes and keeping the weaker one back and actually trapping the Reaper. That is huge. And now what's the follow-up? A single Marine. What is MVP going to do to try to deal with this fast expansion? Looks like he's decided to kind of just give it up. He's re-rallied all his units back to his choke point and going to drop that command center, and he is giving up a huge economic lead to Adelscott here in game number 2 if he continues with this strategy.
Yeah, I feel like there was 2 really big windows for MVP to get through that basically his timing would have been so perfect, but instead of going through the windows, he ran right into the wall. Adelscott almost losing his Stalker there, does need to back up, and MVP may be aggressive here. One thing I want to mention before this battle gets underway is he was trying to place a bunker for that Reaper to get in, but Adelscott killing it off right away, so really nothing going right for MVP. We'll see if this attack is any different. He's got to run 1 Marine up there to see, realizes there is units on the field now, and is forced to back out there. So again, Adelscott making this look easy. He's like, okay, I'll go one of the most risky builds and just get a Nexus first against a former GSL champion. I gotta hand it to him. This guy is playing perfectly and just getting the surround on those units insane. MVP is not in the best of shape at all.
Yeah, definitely. But I like MVP's decision to pull back there. Despite having the concussive shells and a lot of micro opportunities, Protoss is going to be reinforcing very quickly. Warp Gate's just about to complete. And look at this, actually chrono boosting both of the warp gates so he can get additional units out to be safe against any potential attacks that MVP may push forward. And you know, when I fast expand, I really feel like I need to get a robo down to scout. Adelscott, no, he just needs 5 warp gates so he can make a lot of stuff. And that appears to be how he's going to be continuing this, just making pylons and units. No upgrades, no other tech buildings, just warp gates all game.
So that does mean Adelscott's not going to be able to scout, and again, you mentioned getting a Robo Bay on 2 base, which is extremely standard for Protoss, but Adelscott, he's just saying gateway units are my counter drug to Mass Marine Marauder. So we'll see if it can come down to the micro once again. Now MVP, again, is such a good player that he can micro and he can come back from any deficit that he may find himself in. And looking at the army size tab, Adelscott is not hugely in the lead, but looking at the income tab, both players nearly identical. Once again, going to be negating those mules. So Adelscott couldn't be in a better spot, I would say, right now, judging by the fact that he did fast expand, didn't really lose anything because of it. And one thing I also like that Adelscott is doing is look at his army outside of his natural. It's split up almost like it's an actual military, and everything is just organized. Stalkers in the back, sentries just behind the Zealots for the force fields, and the Zealots ready to die for ire there. But just the positioning is so good that even when he's not doing anything except macroing, he's still thinking ahead and microing very well.
And looks like MVP wants to take on the gateway style head on, just going 4 barracks, not adding a factory, not adding any sort of tech, not adding a Ghost Academy. He's, I believe he's completed the combat shields. He has Stim on the way, which takes about half a year in the new patch. And look at Adelscott moving forward, being a little bit aggressive here. Let's go ahead and throw up the army size tab. Bit of an advantage for Adelscott, but he just wants to control the watchtower, it looks like. I wouldn't be surprised to just see him push forward and take another base, and the probe is actually moving towards the gold base. That would be extremely risky. I can't advocate that, and no, looks like he's just going to drop a pylon and then move back while he moves forward with the rest of his army.
He is going to try to engage here. There is nice defense here by MVP. He does have all of his Marauders on the right side. Needs to be careful of the force field. However, that bunker is going to kind of put him over the top. Adelscott realizes I need to back out here. No matter how good my micro is, I don't think I could win that battle. The stim pack about halfway complete. And it looks like before Adelscott can do an attack, that stim pack will be completed, which will play a huge role. And the robo facility is now completed. There should be an observer flying around to see exactly what's going on. And surprisingly, Adelscott has a pylon on the left side. I think that was going to be for his attack, but at the same time, getting a very early third, just like we saw in the last game. And he does have Colossus Tech on the way slightly earlier this time.
Yeah, the one difference, he's favored more units, less upgrades. The Forge just on the way now as we approach the 11-minute mark. Got the observer flying around, as you mentioned, and MVP really, oh, there's the response, now getting the Ghost Academy, which has just completed. Production tab showing that he is not making any ghosts yet. Gonna, well, wait till he hits that 150 gas so he can produce it. There comes the ghost. And MVP running on 3 refineries, not using his 4th refinery yet. I like that. It's not really necessary. Colossus on the way, doesn't quite have enough gas. Adelscott doesn't for the extended thermal lance. And only 1 robotics facility. And actually a Twilight Council is on the way too. So that's interesting. And of course the Forge with the patented +1 armor being researched.
Yeah, I think +1 armor is a really smart choice here. It just helps, especially against Marines, because Marines shoot so fast, but they do a little bit of damage per shot. MVP getting the confidence to move out. Adelscott's observer is going to spot this, so he knows exactly what's headed his way, and that is Mass Marine and Marauder moving out right when that ghost is spawning. He will have enough energy for an EMP in just a matter of seconds here. However, since if we just look at the units tab, there is 2 ghosts now, and so he needs to make sure to try and dodge those EMPs if possible, especially those sentries get hit. And again, Adelscott's army is completely spread out here. He's expecting an attack from the right, and it looks like he doesn't realize the attack could come from that high yield expansion.
Yeah, really dangerous position if MVP decides to move forward. Gonna go ahead and throw up MVP's vision. A scan drops on the units. Looks like he's gonna move left, so Adelscott has to be careful. He could be hit here with the concussive shells, and that is deadly. 1 sentry going down, 2 zealots going down, a couple force fields being dropped to try to isolate MVP's army. He would be crazy to move through that and decides not to attack. Gonna pull back and sit comfortably at the gold base, reinforcing, and now moving forward with his ghost. That's a dangerous man there. But continuing to push forward, dropping a scan. Looks like he's confident he can move forward, dropping a big EMP on both groups of armies, and now gonna push forward. Adelscott may be in a lot of trouble here, getting hit by the stim, and a beautiful concave by MVP, driving straight through the heart. Adelscott may not be able to handle this. 1 Colossus going down, second one not being targeted quite yet, as it's hiding back there. Let's go ahead and see who got the better of that. 87 supply for Adelscott, 110 for MVP. So MVP taking control of this game before expanding.
Now, I gotta hand it to MVP in that battle. He actually had all of his Marauders getting hit by the Colossus rather than the Marine. Even scouting this third base right here, realizes the timing of his expansion of his own third is going to be way delayed. So while he may have done a good job in that battle, his economy is definitely not going to be as exactly where it wants it to be. Just looking at the income tab, Adelscott is actually in the lead. Looks like the random pylon on the left side will get taken out there. And it's also a pretty big deal that the EMPs went off on those sentries. And also, the only force fields he was able to use was in the first engagement of that battle, and he didn't split the army. That was more just to delay the army. And so Adelscott not only eating an EMP to the face, but now he really has no sentries left for that force field, and he also doesn't have the double robo we saw last game to allow him to reduce those Colossus at an increased rate. So that's going to give MVP a lot of time to get out his Vikings, which you can see 2 Vikings on the way right now, and Adelscott's upgrades still behind where they were, just starting that +1 attack right now.
Yeah, exactly. And a second Stargate has just completed for MVP. Going to be using that for Vikings. No add-on there yet. Looks like he just wants to continue Viking production. 5 in the queue as the third base is going up. I'm really surprised MVP did not continue to push onto that third base. I feel like he had it well scouted and he had enough units, despite not having medevacs. I feel like he easily could have broke that, but decides to pull back and be safe. The thing that's dangerous about that is while he's taking a third base to equalize the economy, Adelscott also taking that fourth base at the left side of the Metalopolis. So MVP may not exactly be where he thinks he is. And that can be dangerous, as he cannot afford medevacs at this point because he's got to continue to produce the Vikings. Switching over that starport with a barracks so that he can get double reactors. And what's he pushing forward here? 5 Marines are going to attack the expansion, so that's a little odd.
Yeah, could very well lose these 5 Marines here, but one important thing is to make sure that MVP does not get too many Vikings, because there is only 1 robo. If you look at it right now at that natural, he's not actually producing a Colossus out there, is instead opting to go for more Blink Stalkers, which I think is a beautiful choice, because if there's too many Vikings on the field, which there very well could be, then the Blink Stalkers will take them out. Now, there is 6 Marauders in the queue being produced right now for MVP, which is going to do a massive amount of damage to these Stalkers, and Adelscott, though, the expansion on the left side is going to get cleaned up by a couple of units here, though. Looks like Adelscott is going to be moving to the expansion in the bottom right side. If he can lock this down, he will be 2 expansions ahead. Could potentially see a battle right here. He is running up here. The Colossus, of course, can just walk up that high ground, and Adelscott wants to kill this so badly so he can just push a huge economic advantage. The scan is going to see the army retreat. MVP staying on top of that to make sure his army is in position here, though. Unfortunately for Adelscott, he wasn't able to lock that down, but could attack right now at the natural.
Yeah, he's got to be careful. There's 2 ghosts there, and 2 big EMPs could really hurt Adelscott. Looks like MVP pushing forward a little bit, has not dropped those EMPs yet. Adelscott once again sitting at 1-1 upgrades, chrono boosting out the second armor upgrade, which is just about complete. Stalker's moving forward, trying to snipe off the orbital command, but that gets shut down by the majority of MVP's army. It looks like that's the time for Adelscott to push forward. Big EMP hits the majority of the Stalkers, which blink back, trying to do some fancy Colossus micro here. The Zealots being completely torn apart by MVP's +1 attack upgrades, and looks like Adelscott is in a full retreat here, but there's nowhere to retreat. He's actually getting completely isolated by the concussive shells of the Marauders, and this is going to be a big problem for Adelscott. He doesn't have the upgrade advantage that he had in Game 1, which really favored his style. A lot of stim being used there, so you can see a lot of these units for IM.Mvp completely damaged and the medevac completely drained, so that will be Adelscott's one chance to hold this big attack that's coming for him.
2 major things there. Adelscott was able to snipe a lot of those Vikings, and if you look at the third base of the Terran player, able to kill almost every single SCV in that attack, because those SCVs were actually set to repair that orbital command as it was flying away, which makes it much easier to kill them. And so while he didn't completely knock out that expansion, he was able to kill a lot of the workers, and MVP knows that. He realizes, I have got to do some damage here. The Protoss is on 4 unchecked bases, so I have to make something happen here. But Adelscott may be in a lot better shape than MVP realizes. The Vikings once again going to be getting sniped right here. Is there any Colossus on the field to engage this directly? A flank on the left side attack, even a couple probes being brought off the line to try and deal with this. The other Colossus just spawning and getting sniped here, though, so I think MVP may be in okay shape, but so many stims have been used that these Stalkers may be able to hold their own as they are blinking to try and micro to do as much damage as possible. More Zealots going to be running down here. The Vikings probably going to have to land here as there is no Colossus, and MVP may be on the retreat here, but he's backed against the corner. Can Adelscott continue to micro to hold this off? Right now, though, there is no more Colossus, and he's trying to deal with the Marauders with just Stalkers, and I think he's going to need more Zealots here. The natural looks like it will go down. MVP, though, able to resaturate his expansion, and Adelscott is indeed having a lot of difficulty holding this off.
Yeah, a lot of units being warped in here for Adelscott. The one resource he needs here is just time. If he has enough time to warp in units, he would be okay. More reinforcements coming for IM.Mvp, cutting down a lot of the Stalkers of Adelscott, warping in more units. Looks like he's going to have enough forces here to deal a ton of damage. Chrono Boost being dropped on every warp gate as Adelscott really digs in his nails and tries to hold onto this attack. All the units are so low for MVP, bringing in a lot of Zealots and a lot of Blink Stalkers from below on the low ground. Probes actually coming in, losing a lot of probes is Adelscott, and IM.Mvp is not giving up, reinforcing with a ton more units coming through, running up the ramp, and this may end the game, but I feel like Adelscott will just barely be able to hold on.
Almost sniping all the medevacs there. They are completely out of energy. Got to be blinking, hitting these retreating units. He really wants to kill those medevacs, as MVP does not have the economy to heavily reinforce this army. You can see just a couple units trickling up here at a time. MVP, though, that was his window of opportunity. He absolutely took it, and since he was able to kill that army, if you do look at the units lost tab, 20,000 resources lost to only 15,000. But if you do look at the units tab, fairly even worker counts, but Adelscott does still have an expansion advantage. You can see warping in a lot of warp gates on the left side, but that is only powered by one pylon, so if that gets taken out, that would be devastating for Adelscott. He's got to try and delay this attack if possible, and just warping in those units right now. Can Adelscott actually hold this? It's very crucial because he put so many gateways here right out in the open for MVP to actually snipe here, so we'll see if he can actually hold this, and it looks like more reinforcing units going to be engaging here. The pylon is going to go down. That is 4 warp gates that cannot be utilized, actually 5, as 1 has been taken out as well. So Adelscott in a lot of trouble here. MVP microing everywhere. I took a look at the APM tab there for a second. Their keyboards are probably on fire. As this game, the action is non-stop here in the last couple of minutes. Adelscott desperately trying to get up these gateways once again. Got to hand to MVP, though, for holding on, and now he's taking the high-yield expansion in the center to try and play catch-up as far as the economy goes.
Yeah, really tense moment here. MVP cannot afford to lose all these units for naught, and it looks like blinking up. Couple Guardian Shields going up. Force Field protecting the retreat route as MVP tries to run through there with all his Marauders getting picked up. And this is going to be an easy victory for Adelscott. He's going to secure all 4 bases yet again. Meanwhile, the gold expansion is up for IM.Mvp. He's trying to do a little bit of fancy medevac play there as he drops a few units to try to snipe the Nexus. The Nexus actually under heavy siege here. It's down to 200 HP. Oh my god, it may go down. It's at 60, 20, 5. The Nexus goes down. I cannot believe that happened with so many Blink Stalkers there actually getting taken out. That is huge. Supply count showing 117 for Adelscott, 132 for IM.Mvp. I don't know if Adelscott can afford to just sit back. Upgrades, 2-2 for Adelscott. Meanwhile, IM.Mvp sitting at just +1 attack.
And there is no Colossus on the field yet. Still just those gateway units, which is why MVP has been able to do so much damage here. Adelscott's micro has been phenomenal, but really Marauders just able to clean out those Stalkers and snipe that Nexus at the very last second, which is exactly what MVP needed to do to swing it into his favor. Going to stim at the natural be able to take out not only the Nexus, but also the robotics if you want to. A force field not perfectly placed there. The unit's able to stream up there like ants, one at a time. However, Adelscott is blinking over here with all these units. He does have a ton of sentries now, which could utilize that force field once again to trap that entire army. The Zealots really want to get there, blinking on top of this army as well. Can he actually hold this yet again with just gateway units? I swear he is hacking, but of course he is not, and able to save the medevacs. That's really the only thing. I feel like MVP had a nice little advantage there, but he lost it once again just to those nice upgraded advantage units. I mean, 2 attack, 2 armor, making a huge difference versus that 1-1, and MVP dropping all of his energy on mules at this high yield expansion, but can Adelscott once again swing it back into his favor with this attack? MVP has remacroed up pretty nicely.
Yeah, I don't think he can hold it, actually. No ghosts in this army. Stim going off. No medevacs yet again. Adelscott looks like he just doesn't want to attack, so he drops some force fields, runs right by. A few reinforcing sentries being cut up and Zealots. But Adelscott just, oh my god, more force fields really impeding the Marauders as they're running through. This is like tower defense as they try to get through all these force fields. Adelscott just picking everything. Oh my god, more force fields. This is insane. He's just running straight through, dealing as much harassment as he wants. Now going to pick off the orbital command. Looks like he's going for the SCVs as opposed to the orbital. The Marines and Marauders are still clumped up, trying to get through. Reinforcing Zealots and Sentries are going to come up. Guardian Shield going up, picking off the reinforcements. IM.Mvp is not looking, and there's a big engagement down at 6 o'clock. A lot of units for Adelscott in a beautiful position. Stalker's dealing so much damage as the Zealots come up to tank. I think Adelscott has done it. He's got Zealots completely chewing up the gold base. The Stalkers are going to town, taking out everything that IM.Mvp has. His supply is completely dwindling. I'm getting red in the face as this game is amazing. I think he's actually done it. Come back. This is incredible. Cutting everything down. IM.Mvp has lost control of his production facilities. He has no income. He's got a bunch of command centers and nothing to do with it. I think that's it.
I cannot believe Adelscott's actually winning with just gateway units, especially after losing that entire army. He lost every Colossus. They did virtually nothing. so he decided to just stick with that Wargate technology and rely on his heavy micro ability. And now he's blinked into the main base of IM.Mvp. Every single production facility is here. Only a couple units do remain. And also MVP double expanded, which is now really working against him. Instead of getting the units he needed, he decided to take a slight risk and expand. Now there was going to be an attempt at a slight drop on the left side, actually dropping mules there on that expansion, which are going to do absolutely nothing. And MVP is going to GG after dropping mules. He realizes there is no way he can win this game. Somehow Adelscott beating a former GSL champion with nothing more than gateway units. I can't believe what we just witnessed. I almost feel like him getting the Colossus was just to bait the Vikings so he could go the Stalkers to kill them. And Adelscott's playstyle, it is loose. I expect to see this on ladders. This is a former GSL champion, which is the most prestigious tournament there is. And wow, Adelscott able to take that super easily. At this game, I thought MVP was for sure going to win it after holding up those attacks, after countering attack and doing so much damage. But Adelscott was able to hold on to his Nexus just long enough to get out the units that he needs. And yes, he did lose a Nexus or two, but it was too little, too late. All came down to the micro, and I want to draw attention to that. You mentioned it was like tower defense. I think of it kind of like a maze, throwing up those force fields while running around, never engaging at a time that he shouldn't, and this game's just phenomenal. I could talk about it for hours. I need a breather for a second.
You know, it's actually, baiting out the Vikings is actually a very, very important point. Adelscott with those gateway units is just so mobile. He doesn't really just ball them up, as you kept pointing out. He blinks them around, he runs them out, he pulls his zealots back. He doesn't just A-move in. And in order to deal with that as a Terran, you need to keep stimming, because you need that mobility. If you're making a lot of Vikings, obviously you don't have a lot of medevacs, so what happens there is your units just keep getting lower and lower in life as you take away that 10 and 20 HP on the Marines and Marauders, and when you finally come to fight and you're behind 3 upgrades, the result is what we just saw there. It's just, you know, it takes a game like this to really shift a community's perception, and I think people have said for far too long gateway units are useless, and I think we all really learned a lesson today at the hands of Professor Adelscott, and that was just incredible. Looking forward, I'm playing a little bracket craft here. Adelscott is going to be playing the winner of our next match, which is going to be FXO QXC taking on MVP Genius. So he's going to have either another PVT if QXC can do it, or a PvP if Genius takes it down.
Yeah, it's really funny to me that former GSL champions are getting knocked out left and right here in the TSL. That's showing just the level of play that foreigners can bring to the table. It's not a full Korean sweep, like a lot of people, I think, predicted here. And I mean, especially if you're expecting, you know, anyone to advance that's from Korea, you would think it would be former GSL champions. I mean, I believe MVP won 4-0 in the GSL final. So at that point in time, he was by far the best player. And Adelscott's saying, okay, well, I'm not going to play, you know, the standard Protoss versus Terran. I'm instead going to go with more heavy gateway units. And it's very important that the fact that you said that it can change the community's perception. If there is any game that's going to change the community's perception, it is Adelscott, who is way less known than MVP, still fairly popular.
Right.
But and if he's gonna prove a point about gateway units, it would be in that game. So as you mentioned, our next series is going to be QXC versus Genius, which will be an epic matchup as well. And we'll see, though. I mean, I still think in the voting, I didn't get a chance to look at it right before the cast, but the last time I checked, the voting heavily favoring the Koreans in this. But QXC has shown really good results in previous tournaments, so we'll see if he can actually dethrone this Korean. But once again, the favorite is going to be Genius here, I would say, but the same thing could come into play. Adelscott easily winning against versus MVP. And I don't know if we're going to see another huge upset here, but what a way to start this series. I am pretty excited.
So let's go ahead and introduce our match number 2. Going to be, again, a PVT, but with the roles reversed. The American, now living in Europe, I believe he's living in Spain, is going to be FXO QXC playing Terran. And the Korean Protoss is going to be MVP Genius coming out of Korea, as Koreans do. We're going to be playing game number 1 on Teldream Altar. Game number 2, Zelnega Caverns. And game number 3, if necessary, going to go on Terminus RE, or RE if you like. QXC made a name for himself in the beta. He's been around for quite some time. Really known for being aggressive almost to a fault, and harassing just so much. I mean, when you think harassment can't work and you see QXC somehow make it work, it's just really amazing to watch. His story is actually a pretty good one, how he qualified for this TSL. He finished first in TSL qualifier number 6. I believe he lost in Assembly, which was a LAN in Europe. And rather than going home or rather than partying, he decided to start playing in the TSL because it was an American qualifier. So it was just morning in the USA. So he grinded through that for 10 hours, and the LAN had actually been shut down. He was the only person left there because he was still playing the TSL qualifiers, and he made it through. He won it, and now look at him now. He's trying to take on Genius.
Yeah, and MVP Genius is not going to be an easy feat at all. I mean, he is also a former Brood War player. And, I mean, if you guys did not see him play in his most recent tournaments, I mean, there was some BlizzCon stuff, and just definitely check out Genius. Yeah, he plays a safe, stolid style, which is very heavy macro style, which is actually what we kind of saw in the last game from Adelscott. So we can expect to see similar styles here, especially since the first map is Tal'Darim Altar, which is a map that comes out of Korea. So I feel like the Koreans probably have the most practice on that map and is very, very good for macro style, just based on the size of the map alone. I mean, we actually saw Adelscott do a 15 Nexus on Metalopolis, which to me is just hilarious, but we could very well see that in these games coming up. And QXC, I did meet him at MLG Raleigh. He is a very dedicated and very passionate player, so one thing that I've noticed about him is if he loses the first game, kind of reminds me of Idra a little bit, where he can put him on tilt and he can play emotionally. But recently I have cast some games of his where he played against White Raw, and his playstyle was pretty unique against the Protoss. Wasn't able to actually beat him though, but he would go mass air and things like that, even utilizing fast battle cruisers. Don't know if he's going to play crazy like that in this series or play more standard, but again, he is considered one of the best Terrans in North America. Genius is definitely one of the best Protosses in Korea, so if there's a foreigner matchup TVP I would want to see, it's definitely this.
So looking ahead, we're going to have IM.Mvp versus Goody, and we're going to have Liquid Ret against Naniwa, so don't go anywhere, because after this short commercial break, we're going to be coming back with game number 1 of Genius versus QXC.